Thank you, everyone. My name is Tristan Roberts, Technical Director with HPDC. It's been so thrilling to see all the applications of our beta this afternoon, and I want to, Wendy asked me to step back and give a little bit of context for where we are, where we're going. Of course, sorry, I just need to make one adjustment on my screen. So just looking at where we are in 2020, of course, it's been a major year of upheaval, not just in the baby naming department, but COVID-19 has made it starkly clear, if it wasn't already, that building design makes a life or death difference, and we need to pay more attention to this. As an example, coronavirus has our attention right now, but chronic exposure trends remain a huge concern. The good news is that cancer rates overall are going down, as this graph shows. The long-term trends for previously rare endocrine-related cancers are up, and these chemicals are prevalent in our buildings. So you might ask, what is our vision for tackling this problem? What is ahead for us in the next few years, and more to make healthier products and healthier buildings more of a reality? Well, fortunately, we don't have to wait to 2025 even to get babies born in space with unpronounceable names. So I think 2025 looks like blue sky to me. Couple observations based on personal experience. At HPDC, we continue to believe that an open standard that standardizes data reporting from manufacturers to the public is just inherently beneficial. Manufacturers, we know, we've seen it today, don't want to poison their customers, and designers want to make more informed decisions. Sharing data in a consistent way as enabled by the HPD Open Standard, as implemented in the HPD Builder, and through the format that we provide, makes that more possible. And as we get that standardized data, we ultimately get wisdom. One model of knowledge management is this, as shown here. There's a progression from data to information to knowledge to wisdom, each building on the foundation below. To make wiser decisions, for example, with product selection, we need better data. The HPD Open Standard began about 10 years ago to provide this. But wisdom isn't just based on raw data. Raw data gets assigned meaning and context and then is applied. Wisdom means a shared understanding of values to organize that data and guide decisions. Another way of describing this, and Rand really put this in my mind earlier this afternoon, thank you, Rand, is that feeling in your body, feeling the rightness of it there. And I want to propose that if we're doing the right thing in this movement, we can feel it in our bodies. And as we feel that, we will continue to draw the support and growth that we need. And I want to briefly offer some thoughts on that. This is my redheaded dad. On his dad's shoulders, circa 1948. My grandfather, my opas we called him, was born in England and grew up in Alberta, Canada. He was a boxer at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. That's him puffing out his biceps. Here's my opas surveying the Banff-Windermere Highway in 1922. He went on to work for the General Electric Company in Schenectady, New York as an electrical engineer from 1924 to 1965. In that period of time, almost every industry in the developed world was electrified. One thing that GE made to make that possible was a lot of capacitors. A capacitor stores electricity for a very short period of time, and for safety, it requires a fluid to insulate it, prevent arcing, and to cool it. Polychlorophinated biphenyls, or PCBs, are very good at this. PCBs were later identified as danger cancer-causing chemicals, but for many years, GE, along with companies like Monsanto, made and used a lot of PCBs. They did so at plants including this one in Fort Edward, New York. In the 1970s, the EPA in the US banned the discharge of PCBs into navigable waters under the Clean Water Act. But by 1977, GE had already dumped as many as 1.3 million pounds of PCBs into the Hudson River. Prior to 1973, PCBs, an oily substance that does not break down in nature, were slowly building up throughout the Hudson River. But by luck, hundreds of thousands of pounds of these PCBs were retained in sediment behind the Fort Edward Dam. Sadly, just a couple years before the extent of PCB pollution and danger was understood, the large buildup on sediment behind that dam led the Niagara Mohawk Power Company to remove the Fort Edward Dam in 1973 at the recommendation of the Army Corps of Engineers and New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Some of those PCBs made it as far as the Battery in New York City. However, again, PCBs being a heavy, oily substance, they were deposited in eddies where the river flowed, mostly north of Albany, the capital of New York State. The most significant hotspot for PCB accumulation from Fort Edward was just a couple miles downstream in the Thompson Island pool. Fort Edward, Thompson Island, and associated hotspots are depicted here on a 1976 sediment survey. In the photo on the left, I've zoomed out to show Fort Edward at the top, Thompson Island in the middle, and then 10 miles downstream, that's where I was born and raised. My parents owned and still owned a farm that extends down to the river. I used to go exploring in the woods down to the river with my mom, but I never, ever put a toe in that river. And I always felt a little unsettled by the odd smell of chemicals down there. The whole situation just didn't feel right in my body. Decades of legal maneuvering later, the GE agreed to a massive Superfund cleanup in 2006. Since then, they removed more than 300 pounds of PCBs, 300,000 pounds of PCBs from the river out of the 1.3 million they dumped, proving once again at a scale we could have done without. I think you'll agree that you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But big picture, what the GE took part in and profited from, and I profited from, as you'll see, was a tragedy of common. They exploited a resource, the ability of a large body of water to apparently make pollution disappear, to deal with multiple flaws in their business model. One flaw being the high cost of making PCBs, and then wasting millions of pounds of them by sending them down the drain. Another being poisoning their own workers and customers. Another being externalizing from their business model the cost of proper disposal. Back to my grandfather, I don't know if he ever worked on capacitors or PCBs. His specialty was electrifying paper factories. But one way or another, the soaring stock price of General Electric from 1950 to 2000 gave my grandparents a nice retirement and put me through college. I feel responsible for this legacy to the extent that that's possible. So let's go one generation down. That's my dad on the left with my uncle. When my dad was home from college, my grandfather helped get him a job at the GE, sweeping floors at the turbine factory in Schenectady on the night shift. At that time, cigars were sold in vending machines on the factory floor. Workers would smoke the cigars on the shift and then toss the bands on the ground. Do you see a theme here yet? According to my dad, a guy named Paley took him aside at the beginning of his first shift and said, I collect White Owl cigar bands. If you see one, pick it up and give it to me at the end of the night. At the start of the next shift, my dad handed Paley 27 cigar wrappers. Paley went nuts. He said the most he got from the last guy was 2, or most often none. Well, it was clear that my dad did a more thorough sweeping job than the last guy, but also done my dad a favor and shown him where he could hole up on the floor and take a nap safely for a few hours during a shift. It was never a night after that that my dad didn't find a cigar band, but most often, the most he found after that was maybe 4. My dad's cigar band findings reverted to the mean, but he never did. He went on to become a gifted math teacher, father of 2, and spent a 30-year career running a large senior living community nursing home in Saratoga Springs, New York. Economics and management challenges of running a nursing home were and are brutal. And I would learn from him every night over dinner and walking down to milk the cows what the challenges of the day were. Most often they revolved around nurses or residents being stressed out by someone else's behavior and needing someone to listen and problem solve. Above all, what I learned from my dad was that there was magic to be found in listening closely and taking seriously the challenges and the ideas of his staff and residents. He always had an open door and addressed issues head on rather than dumping them in the river. Much as I revere my grandfather, what GE made super profitable during his long career there was, to at least some extent, exploiting the commons for profit. Costs of pollution were external to their business. My dad, through excellent broom pushing and management skills, shows a wiser model for today, unlocking the value in closed systems. And that's what we're doing today in the material health ecosystem. We are bringing to the surface data that existed before but never was accessible, and empowering manufacturers to create products more in tune with the customer's well-being. We are empowering green chemists to focus the power of their innovation on high-demand, high-toxic chemicals, as William Paddock and TCNA demonstrated earlier. We're empowering architects and others to deliver on the promise of the design, a world with healthier children, patients who get sick less often and recover faster, and workers who bring their best creativity to the office. I want to speak about 3 other key individuals who brought us here today. We've heard their names a couple times this afternoon. But going back to the 2000s, Bill Walsh, Tom Lent, and the team at Healthy Building Network, and thank you, Teresa, for being here today from HPN, led successful campaigns to get arsenic out of treated wood, to put pressure on cleaning up the PVC industry, and reducing our exposure to toxic formaldehyde, among others. But they also saw the limits of doing this on a one-off whack-a-mole basis. The team at HPN was, and as Teresa described, is doing their own patent research into product formulation. But back then they saw the potential of partnering with industry to bring this kind of data to scale at a level that they couldn't do on their own. And with Wendy Vittori, then an independent consultant, they found not only another person who looked badass with their arms crossed, but someone with a background in open standards from the IT sector who got this vision. Together with many others, including many of you here today, they brought the HPD initiative from a white paper to where we are now. I also want to say something, and I appreciate others have done so this afternoon, about the voices that we have been missing. This is my Oma, Helen Korthal-Feltis, with my dad on the right, and on the left in a restaurant near Fort Edward called the Chicken Basket. My grandmother was born in the US while her Dutch father was working here, so while she was raised in the Netherlands, she had a US passport. When Germany occupied the Netherlands during World War II, she was a year away from a PhD in chemistry. But according to my great-grandmother, who told my uncle this, my grandmother was very politically active and described her as an angry grad student. She'd probably fit in right on campus today. Helen was sent to the US because she had that US passport, and her parents felt that she would not survive the war. In fact, 2 of her brothers barely survived the war in forced labor camps. I've seen her passport, by the way. It's stamped via Casablanca, for those who've seen that classic movie. She ended up getting a job in a lab in Schenectady, New York, home of GE, was married in 1943, and then started having her 3 sons in 1945. From then, she became a homemaker, even while her female friends from University in Amsterdam went on to become doctors and chemists. The year 2020 has brought a tidal wave of understanding that while a lot has opened up since 1945 for women and people of color, inclusivity and social equity go well beyond token representation and encompass the emotions that are stored in our body and our microexpressions. I happen to think that many of the people, from my grandmother to the Black and brown people who have not been included in shaping polluting industries, would show much more good sense than the men who were there at the GE and other companies when such decisions were made. And this has been announced previously, but I want to underline it today, that this year, HPDC's board of directors voted to expand our definition of the material health community and our membership to fully include the residents and workers who live and work in, construct and maintain buildings, and those living and working where products are extracted and made, most importantly, to include people of color. Without the voices of those directly affected, we are not addressing the problem. And in our technical development work, which I'm proud to lead here, we will implement the means to reflect a fuller understanding of health information and social equity in reporting supported by the HPD Open Standard. If healthy products and information about them are not equitably available to all, then we're also not addressing the problem. Thank you for coming with me on this journey back in time. I hope it provides some orientation to the future and a sense of why we're doing this. And for many of us, why it feels right in our bodies to do this work. We have an incredible opportunity to transform not only the building products industry and architecture and design, but to leverage our impact to transform the chemical industry and all manufacturing. Stepping up and taking responsibility for our impact, bringing costs into our business models, and delivering on the highest benefits of health and safety we can offer our customers is our opportunity and our destiny. You can see here the trajectory we're already on, and it's incredible. We topped 5,000 HPDs in 2019, and we're on track to surpass 8,000 this year. Every year, with the support of our incredible board, technical committee, and technical subgroups, we improve the consistency and usability of the HPD Open Standard. Here's where we're going next. We've made a lot of headway, but we have a lot to do to make these data more accessible, usable, and going back to our first speaker of the day, to reach the late majority and offer a better return on investment for everybody. We're proud to partner with those of you who are here with us as early adopters, and now is the time to get further and take the next steps. So to sum up some key points that I want to look for over the next 5 years, I want to make an offer and an ask to each of the following key groups. And I know many of you are here today from these groups, so please take this personally and let me know what you think. For manufacturers, we want to offer you a clear roadmap and a mature, consistent standard where all companies can participate according to the same harmonized rules. And we're going to ask you to keep up the great work with reporting, assessment, and optimization. Help us deepen transparency into the supply chain. Our ecosystem stakeholders, please use the data we're producing from these HPDs. And thank you, Teresa, for showing examples of that. And if you need updates to the standard so it generates the data you need, we want to work with you. Our ask to you, keep developing those tools and models to use this data to inform decision-making to make it easier for everyone that wants to use this data. And to our architects, designers, owners, and developers, we want to standardize standardized transparency in documentation, specs, and procurement, so you can easily incorporate this into your practices, making HPDs more common, more useful. And we're going to ask you to keep asking for those HPDs and other transparency documents. And, you know, as we look ahead to the future, I devoted this talk to the wisdom of our ancestors, and I also happen to find wisdom in dad jokes. And this is one my son actually tells me. So I'm gonna end on this, and I think it's I happen to think it's apropos. You can decide. But duck walks into a convenience store and asks the clerk, "Do you have any grapes?" The clerk says no. The duck leaves. The next day, the duck returns and asks, "Do you have any grapes?" The clerk again says no, and the duck leaves. The day after that, the duck walks into the store and asks, "Do you have any grapes?" The clerk just becomes livid, says, "No, you've come in here the last 2 days asking for grapes. I told you every time, no, we don't have grapes. I swear, if you come back in here one more time, I'm going to nail your webbed feet to the floor." The duck left and came back the next day. This time the duck asked, "Do you have any nails?" The clerk says, "No." The duck said, "Good. Do you have any grapes?" So keep asking for those grapes. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful afternoon with you all, and look forward to your questions, comments, and more discussion.
Tristan, I don't know if I should thank you more for adding gravitas or lightening the mood, because you just did both beautifully. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Nadav.
All right. So, Sean, tough act to follow. Are you up for it?
Yeah, I was gonna. Everybody hearing me now?
Yes. Yeah, we hear you.
All right, good. Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Tristan, for that.